I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Board of Finance today, Thursday, May 17th. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the establishment of the fiscal year mill rate. Bob?
As we were talking all along, we're looking at, I recommend a mill rate of $32.87 for real estate. And as in the last couple of years, we had a separate mill rate for automobiles, which would be 32 even. We keep that exactly the same.
What's the reason for that?
Hmm?
What's the reason for that?
You know, we did that a couple of years ago when the state was coming in and they said, okay, it was going to be 29 like last year, so we went to the 32 because we kept it flat.
Okay.
And we've kept it flat all along. It doesn't really hurt us that much at this point. We can go to 40, well, you can't go to 45, you have to go to 32.87. But the state has reversed their decision and they said towns could go up as high as 45 because they don't want to do the municipal reimbursement to the towns for the offset of the motor vehicles. So.
Okay. I knew there was something involved with the limiting it or something like that, right?
So entertain a motion to set the fiscal year 2018-2019 mill rate for real estate to 32.87 and for automobiles to 32.00. Second?
Second.
This is for discussion, right?
Not yet. We have a first and second. Okay. Discussion.
Okay, so my opinion on this is that we got the $1 million that we didn't expect to get. So my feeling about that is why not give it back to the taxpayers? Since it was something we hadn't planned on receiving. And this way, the mill rate will be even just a little bit less. And to me, it seems like the right thing to do because in a way, and it's not a profit, but it is a windfall because you didn't think you were going to get it. So I think we should consider that rather than just putting it, so that it can be spent, maybe giving it back to the taxpayer.
Well, first of all, it's not $1 million.
Oh, I thought it was.
Well, the ECS is, but
That's
there's
what I'm
other
talking about.
adjustments to the dollars that the legislator had come up with. So it comes down to a little less than $700,000. We did lose some money in other categories.
Okay, my understanding was that it was.
Well, the ECS went up about $1 million,
Right.
but the other some other categories brought it down. So we have to look at the net
Well,
effect on the town budget.
I'm simply talking about the ECS that we did not expect to get.
And then the other issue is, if we were to do something like that, it's very risky because last year, and I know they put into a law this year to say that the governor can't take it away, but there's nothing for the governor or the next governor to come in and say, okay, maybe we're going to assess the different towns, their portion of the cost for the pension plans for the teachers, like they tried to do last year. So I think it's risky this year to try to take that position and reduce the mill rate, because I think if the governor or the legislator does something, we could be in a shortfall next year at this time.
Aren't there always risks to a certain degree? And, Malloy won't be there next year, so that can only be a plus.
There's always a risk. There's always a risk, but $1 million or an adjustment of $700,000 to the mill rate is, I think, just way too. It's not prudent to make that adjustment at this point. Next year, if things work out, then maybe we'll take it into consideration at that point.
Can I just be clear on the numbers? Because what I saw was 7.9 million is what we had wanted. We were actually given 7 million, and now we're given 900,000 back, right? Not
Right.
a million. So
Right.
it's 900,000.
Yeah, but there's other categories where they actually took dollars away from us.
Right, but it didn't start out at $1 million ever. It was
Oh, no,
900,000.
no, it was 900.
It was never $1 million. And so now we're down to 700,000 because 200 came out of other buckets for the town.
That's right.
And when you talk about the other buckets, what's the two?
It's municipal sharing dollars. Town aid roads, I think I didn't bring that report down from CCM, but it was like 2 or 3 different buckets that they took money away from us, small dollars, and then the biggest piece was about $150,000, which was the municipal sharing.
I guess it's a tough balancing act. I mean, it's no secret that I felt that out of our $2.1 million in grand list growth, right, 1.3 million of it was on properties that were paying taxes that were assessed at a higher value, correct? So I appreciate the risk factor. I just think that we, as a board, really need to look at this mill rate and where it's going. We had an opportunity to lower the mill rate. We increased spending by 2.1 million. Again, 1.3 million of that was on reassessing properties at a higher amount. Next year, we're not gonna have that, and we have a lot of debt and a lot of things we're gonna start incurring. So like, at what point, Bob, are we able to do strategically, look at it and lower the mill rate if we don't do it now?
I think if we were to take this into consideration next year, you'd have, if they go to the $8 million, we're gonna have a piece of it next year to offset the mill rate. It would just be delaying it 1 year, really, when it comes out to it.
But that's assuming that we don't increase spending by 2.1 million in a year.
Well, I mean, you got growth in the town as well. I mean, there's,
But am I right, my numbers are right, about 800 came from
Somewhere in
you,
that area,
and about
yeah.
1.3 million was on homes that were already assessed, so.
I mean, you look around all the building that's taking place, the one on Payne Road just sold for $700,000 across the street from
Yeah,
McCall Park.
Pete Sullivan's house.
You know, so,
No, I just,
I think
again,
it's just-
I would just like it if we look long-term at the mill rate and where it's going, because it's, I'm not gonna say it's overly high, but it can get there very quickly, especially with the school projects coming on, the PD, transferring some of that to long-term debt, right? You know, we
yeah,
really
but
just have
if
to-
you look at the long-term debt schedules, I mean, our
Yeah.
debt is coming down each particular year. We keep it level because
Right.
we maintain the short-term debt so that we can pay down more of that short-term. We've been doing it the last couple of years.
But when we looked at it, how it was gonna affect long-term, I believe we had talked about
The
it.
PD really doesn't have much of an effect on the debt service. It's the schools later on, and in
Oh,
2 or 3
yeah.
years that are gonna have the bigger
But that could
effect
be almost 2 mils, right?
when it comes on.
Yeah. So, that's all I'm trying to say. I'm gonna, I always take your advice as the resident expert on what's safe and what's not safe to do, but again, I would just hope the board would look at our mill rate and think of creative ways where we can start getting going in the right direction.
So Brian, to that point, what are the surrounding town mill rates? Like, where do we compare now? with
Ridgefield,
what's-
Ridgefield's 27.
But they just voted a whole bunch of, like, is that their current mill rate?
27, it'll be like 27 something.
But
You gotta remember Ridgefield though, Ridgefield doesn't do short-term borrowing. There's no short-term borrowing in Ridgefield. They do all long-term debt. They're gonna take on that.
I mean, they just
Ridge-
did $5 million of capital improvements this year.
But Ridgefield also, don't forget, bit the bullet 20 years ago when they redid 8 schools, built a new high school, redid their parks and rec. So now they're reaping the benefits. In long term, they're reaping the benefits. Look, and to be honest with you, to me, like in my business, right, I don't really care what other construction companies' profit lines are. I know what I want to make and where I need to be. What I'm saying is at 32.8, the mill rate's high for the area.
Right,
I
but
mean,
when you look at.
Newtown's probably a little bit higher.
Newtown is higher, they're $1.15 higher. They just voted it in.
But look at some of the services that Newtown gets. I mean, look at the services Ridgefield gets. Look at their parks and rec. You talked about your turf fields
Yeah, so
and all
who would
that.
be similar to us? Like, who would we compare ourselves to?
I don't know, Bob would probably know better
Because
than I.
comparisons are helpful, because it helps us understand what it costs to run a town similar to ours, right? So
Well,
like,
if you're
who
gonna
would be the
compare it,
comparison?
then you have to compare it based on the taxpayer's ability to pay, which is the equalized mill rate. And we're the second highest, Newtown is the highest as far as per capita, what the income is and the ability to pay the mill rate. So you can't really compare the number mill rate, you have to look at the whole picture. So 2070 is nothing
So-
compared to 32, whatever, in a way.
So Bob, is there a way for us to look at, you know, whatever the 5 or 6 surrounding towns are that we would compare ourselves to, and just look at their mill rates compared to ours, just so we have a benchmark, you know, just so we know, like, where are we?
Madam Chair, if I might, the mill rate by itself is just one number, it's meaningless. You have to compare it to the value of the property. So, you know, like to say that Ridgefield mill rate is, you know, larger or smaller than ours, doesn't mean much until you plug in what the property values are. So a 4-bedroom colonial, let's say it's 2,600 square feet in Ridgefield, is not gonna have the same market value as it does here. You're gonna get more house here, it's gonna be a lower price. You know, the example I always use, if all you're interested in is a low mill rate, go to Greenwich. It's, what, 11 or 12? But your
Can't buy a home.
your home will be 1.4 million there. So to try to base any kind of analysis on mill rate alone is kind of a futile exercise.
But I do think when people are looking for homes, they do look at mill rate.
Well,
So,
it's,
so I think it would be interesting just to be informed as a board to know, you know, how do we compare, right?
Yeah, and I think to Matt's point, it's almost what Cindy was mentioning is there are probably some equalization formula, because it's not just mill rate and property value, but it's income. What are people able to pay? I mean, it's a complex algorithm to say, okay, if you're making X number of dollars, you know, Connecticut average, what's the affordability of this community? We're probably one of the more affordable communities, even at a mill rate of 32.87, because our market values are lower than, say, Newtown or Ridgefield or Wilton, et cetera. So it's much more complex, and I think home buyers aren't looking at that piece. They're looking at, what are the taxes I have to pay on this house, and what can I get for my dollar? I mean, what's the affordability here? How much
Correct.
can I mortgage, and how much do I have down, and how much do I have to pay in taxes? So that's their interest.
So if you look at the annualized grand list, Greenwich obviously is number 1. Number 2 is New Canaan, but when you come to us, we're number 71 in the state, almost like in the middle. But if you look at Brookfield at number 36, and if you go to Ridgefield at number 10, 10th lowest, where else? Newtown is 43. So they're cheaper than us when you do the equalized grand list. But I mean, when you look at the entire state in total, we're just about in the middle.
And when
So
you-
to compare the surrounding towns to the mill rate, like Matt had said before, you got to look at the differences in the type of homes that you may wind up buying. You can get a home, and you can't get a home, let's say in Greenwich, for $400,000 or $500,000. You may get a piece of property, but it's not going to be a home like you have up here.
I just want to say to Brian's point, I think that Bethel's affordable right now, but when things start coming online, that could change. And I think we're just trying to get an idea of what direction and what increments we think it's going to be increased, because that's definitely going to be a factor down the road as far as affordability of Bethel.
I also think we need to keep in mind that renovating 2 schools to basically brand new would be a huge selling point for a family who wants to move into this town. You know, and I think people would be willing to pay taxes to have those newly renovated schools.
Well, I mean, personally, I sell a lot of houses, and I'm gonna be honest with you, once the schools are built, no one knows the history, nor do they care. They just look at their bottom dollars. For us in Bethel, it's very meaningful, right? We're all happy that the schools are getting renovated, they're being built, but people are gonna look at the mill rate. And look, I don't wanna get into an argument over, you know, you need to look at this, you need to look at that. The Board of Finance's job is to look at the overall finances of town and do the best we can for the taxpayer. That's all I'm saying. And if our mill rate's gonna grow to 35, 36, 37, that could be a problem. And we're almost at 33 now, and we're saying the mill rate's gonna go up 2 when the schools come on, most likely. That brings you to 35. It's just something we have to pay attention to. It's not attacking anyone. I supported the schools. I supported most of the projects there. I get it. We need to improve the town, but we need to have an overall sense of how it's gonna impact the mill rate, because that's what people understand. I'm sorry. It's whether or not we think we can explain it, that's what people understand, the mill rate. What am I getting assessed on every $1,000? What does it cost me to live here? So, you know, and again, one of my houses, the assessment went up 30,000. That's a big hit in 1 year, especially for an investment property. That's $1,000 in a year. That's a big hit. So, you know, I mean, we just need to be cognizant of that. Some people might not have been able to afford that hit. That's my only point. There's no value judgment here.
I think if you look at the last couple of years, I mean, it's been pretty stable. In
Sta-
fact, this
yeah.
year went down and there was 1 year there was no growth. I mean, I got a $20,000 increase in my assessment, so I know what I'm gonna get hit with.
Yeah,
right?
you know what you're getting
Yeah,
hit with,
so-
yeah. But again, thank God, you know, you or me or some people are fortunate enough where we could afford that increase, but there are people who might not be as lucky, and we just need to keep that in mind.
So Bob, when you say that we could maybe next year apply whatever there might be extra and that could stabilize or bring down the mill rate, what are the chances of getting to this point next year and then that not happening?
Well, look,
Well,
that's
I would
a
guess-
question for us to answer,
Hmm.
right? Because we're going to be the ones who decide the spending. I think we all believe that I believe we have agreement as to what our objective is, and it is to do what's right for the Bethel taxpayer. That's in a short-term time frame and in a longer-term time frame. Given the uncertainty of the payment, I think it seems to me somewhat imprudent to take it to the bank this year. I think what seems to be prudent, thinking about it longer term, right? And Brian, you had mentioned we have to think about things longer term.
Absolutely.
I believe the key date in the future for us is 2022, right? That's when the school debt is gonna come on. And when we look at the debt profiles, schedules that Phoenix provided us, that bump comes in 2022, 2023.
Yep.
By paying down short-term debt, we alleviate that bump. And so my advice to the board, my suggestion would be that we don't build it into the mill rate, because that's only short-term helpful, but in the long run, I believe it's gonna be hurtful. If we can take that money, when it comes, if it comes, and apply it further to short-term debt, kind of like the third step of our 5-step plan, to me, that will result in the best long-term plan for the town of Bethel. That will keep the mill rate on a relatively even level, or at a relatively even level, even through the school rental bond. If we don't pay down that debt, that short-term debt, then we're gonna end up with a big bump in 2022, 2023 that will wash away any benefit that a temporary mill rate.
But I want to go on record. You know I agree with paying down short-term debt. There's no argument there. What I say is that we also need to control spending. For the members who haven't been on the Board of Finance before, this was a chip shop. You had $2.1 million worth of grand list growth to work with, not to affect the mill rate, right? You had 2.1 million. Most years, you're not gonna get 2.1 million. Most years that I can remember historically, and you guys will go back more than me, if we had 800,000, that was a home run. In growth in the grand list, 800,000 was a home run. So what I'm saying is, we need to really focus on how do we control spending in the future, because you're not gonna have this 1.3 million in addition to the 800 next year. It's not gonna be there. And if we think we're just gonna keep trudging along without a financial plan and a real strategic plan that we're gonna stick to, all this effort in reducing short-term debt isn't gonna mean anything if we just keep burning through whatever our growth is in the grand list.
Well, that's the thing.
That's all I want to say, but I do agree with you, Dad. I'm 100% on board, and I think some people are confused. I'm on board with paying down short-term debt. You have no argument for me in that. You just know where my argument comes in on the opposite side, are operating expenses, and what are we gonna do in years coming up? And that's all I want to say.
And I just want to echo about that. I've never been against paying down short-term debt. I'm on board with that. And, but it is going to be an exercise, not in futility, but it's going to really not be beneficial if we don't look at spending. Like, we can't look at the mill rate in a vacuum or short-term spend, paying off short-term debt in a vacuum. That's all I'm saying.
Since we all seem to be on the same page, I'll move the question.
Second.
All right. All those in favor of setting the mill rate as,
You have to vote on calling the question first.
all those in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Okay, the question is called. All those in favor of setting the mill rate as previously stated, 82.87 for real estate, 32.00 for autos for the fiscal year 2018-19, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Unanimous. Second agenda item is the appointment of the auditor.
Yes, this is the time of the year that we have to report to OPM for the auditors for the fiscal year 2017-18. And I would recommend the use of PKF O'Connor Davies, which was the same firm that we used last year. And we were very happy with their services, and I think we should continue engaging them to do the audit.
Okay.
I make a motion to go with Mr. Kozlowski's recommendation.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor of appointing PKF O'Connor Davies as the auditor for the town of Bethel, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All against? Unanimous. Comptroller's report.
Okay. I emailed the report the other day, the monthly report. We hadn't done one in a few months since we were doing the budget. These are, oops, excuse me.
Okay.
These are without adjustments to the other enterprise funds. So these are gross numbers at this point. Everything pretty much is in order. There's one adjustment that I think we have to make. We're looking into it right now. And it's in Public Works. There's an adjustment that has to come out of, for salaries, out of Public Works to one of the utilities. We'll split it between the two utilities. It's a salary for the new Director of Utilities, and it was misposted to the town side and should have went to the other side. So that's going to increase their surplus there. And then if you look at fleet maintenance, it looks a little funny because of the adjustment, not the adjustment, but the actual, I just want to get to the page, but it has to do with the appointment of a new director in the highway department for mechanical work. And he was charged, the two of them were charged just to, we can just get to that page. It's page. If you look at the negotiated salaries, right now they're over by about $5,914. But you got to look at the two categories together, salary and negotiated salaries together, because there was more posted to negotiated salaries for the individual that was promoted to the head mechanic. So that just overall, that makes that account look a little out of whack. But other than that, I mean, when you look at the probate court, we bill the other three towns at the end of the year. So we'll receive the money back there, and it'll be pretty much on target, if not for a little surplus. Professional services, those are the legal fees that we pay during the course of the year. We kind of budget that at a lower than normal number. Town insurance is over by 102, but there's allocations that have to be made to the different enterprise funds, sewer and water. So that'll come into line. And I think for the most part, that's about it. Everything else seems to be on target.
Bob, with the police overtime,
Mhm.
it looks like they're about 25,000 over right now. Do you have any idea how much in grants you're expecting to get back?
What was that?
For the overtime,
Yeah,
how much in grants do you think you're supposed to get back from like the?
I don't have that number offhand.
Okay.
What's it run typically?
Well, it depends on your department.
Yeah, I think there's one out there right now for about $10,000.
It's 100% the texting grant?
Yep, I don't think that one came in yet.
Yeah, they just had to submit that.
Yeah, that was like a couple of weeks ago.
Just goes by department, Bob. Like they allocate, like Richfield gets 20,000, you're allowed to spend on that grant, it just depends.
And will that be allocated against that?
It's supposed to
account?
come back, do you put it in the general fund or do you put it back into the overtime account?
We'll put it back into the overtime account.
Overtime account.
Bob, I was looking at the highway department, it's 431 it's under significantly by 654.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby hasn't gotten all the bills in for the road work,
That's
so, I mean,
431.
that's gonna, overstate that account at this point.
Yeah, and he's also got, springtime work to do before the fiscal year change.
So that'll fill up.
Yeah, that'll be depleted.
Intergovernment agency subsidiaries, I guess, that's down 293, 275 of that is paramedic. Is that just a one-time charge? So we'll get that 250 one-time charge or whatever it turns out to be.
And when you look on the revenue side, year-to-date balance right now is 2.3. The same period last year, we collected about 3.5 in all the different categories. So, I mean, you'd be looking at a little over $1 million in surplus on the revenue side, assuming that everything was the same as last year.
And the $1.1 million that the revenue ed is,
Well, that's the ECS dollars that are down.
and that, okay, so that's about what we budgeted, the 7. The charges for services looks kind of low. Is that something I'll also pick up kind of the last couple of months?
Yeah, I think over the last 2 months, their estimates done 18 months ago, but I think we're gonna come, like I said, over the last year, the last 2 months, we collected in all these categories about $3.5 million. So we'd certainly, be in a good position by the end of the year.
When the summer camp money starts coming in for Park and Rec, that charges for services will jump up some too.
Bob, the highway department, I just remember Bob talking about how, and maybe you saying this about him too, that there's a lot of invoices that he has to,
The road invoices, Bobby's very
Reconcile?
particular, so if there's a mistake on an invoice, he sends the entire invoice back rather than pay the part that's correct.
sure.
So, it's a timing difference and it could wind up being a couple of months, 2 or
But so
3.
does it all get reconciled by the end of the year? I mean,
Oh, yeah,
is it-
yeah.
Okay, because I
Yeah.
know that came up during the budget discussions.
Yeah, that'll be reconciled before, as they're doing the year-end audit. He should have it done by August, the latest, for everything for 17, 18.
Okay.
Any other questions on the comptroller's report? Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Last
Last
agenda
item
item,
is the discussion is
short-term debt. My favorite topic.
We have a little schedule here that we put together. Matt, can you pass this down? So what this shows is the current, we start off at July 1st of 17, and we have $22,950,000 that are outstanding on the short-term debt. And the reason why we're bringing this up at this point is June 5th, we have a band sale, so we have to make some decisions. There's about $500,000 right now, $489,923, that's available in the current year's budget that it didn't pay down back in last October. So that will charge against the short-term debt. And then also what we're looking at in order to eliminate the debt in the next year, year and a half, is a charge against the fund balance of about $2 million. So that would bring us down to $20,460,077. During next fiscal year, we have $1,225,000 in the budget to pay down the short-term debt. And then you can see that there's $1,925,000, that's the addition for the PD. That will be bonded when we do the bonding of the PD. The footnote number 4 indicates how it was calculated. And then 7 would be the expected amount that, whether we borrow it at this time, short-term for the schools, because the schools are gonna start doing some construction, or we borrow it in November. We may make this note roughly a little bit shorter than the last one. But what I'd like to do is to maybe borrow some of it now, just in case there's work that's gonna be done over the summertime. Because there's a restriction of 30 days. Once you borrow the money, let me put it this way. We can pay out for design work and architectural fees, and that's not an issue because we get reimbursed when we borrow the money from the investment houses. But if you're doing construction work, you can only charge against the bond or the ban within 30 days of the time that you actually do that note. So if we were to fund construction during the course of the summer and then we didn't borrow it until November, we'd have an issue as far as the 30-day limit is involved. So we put the $20 million in there at this point, whether we're gonna borrow part of it this June 5th, or we're gonna do another piece in November. But in any case, that number is gonna be bonded later on. So you see the net number down at the bottom, number 9, that's the number that's gonna come out that will wind up going to bonding. And by doing that, I mean, you basically zero out the short-term debt over the next year and a half or so.
So you don't need the entire 20 now, but you may by November-ish.
Yeah, the other restriction you gotta watch is arbitrage with, spending the money over an 18-month period. You have to spend it within, and we probably would on the school project, but you have to spend 85% of your borrowed funds within 18 months. Otherwise, you can get taxed from the IRS too.
So if you take 10 now and 10 later, that would,
Yeah,
it's like 18 months from when you take the first one or when you take each 10?
from each time. Because we have to report on how much was spent on each one of the bonds that when we renew the note, how much did you pay down on it?
And Bob, how does that match up with the expected costs being incurred by Rizzo? Do we have a sense for?
I
what
talked to
we're
John
getting?
Minty yesterday and I said, can you get me a cash flow statement in the next week to give us an idea of when money would be spent? Because the big thing is during the summertime, there may be some work that's gonna be performed for, and it's gonna be testing, so that's not an issue. But if they do any kind of construction, if there's remediation on any of the buildings, then you get into construction work, and that could cause a problem here. So we may wind up doing a small amount, maybe just $5 million to cover us, because I don't expect it to be that big over the summer. But the big construction is gonna start somewhere around November.
So the 20 is kind of a placeholder until we get that schedule.
Exactly.
We get that schedule. If it's 5, fine. Do 5 on June 5th.
Because certainly within the 18-month,
Yep.
that's not gonna be an issue here.
And then if there's a further construction analysis that shows more money coming on, then get the rest in November.
So basically, we're gonna pay about 3.1 million in cash
The next,
in the next year.
yeah,
And then the rest
of which is in debt service right now about 1.6.
Right. And then the rest of it, we're just gonna switch to long-term bonds, basically.
The remaining amount going to long-term bonds.
Well, in the expectation of paying for the capital items out of the reserve, out of the fund balance,
Out of the fund balance over the next, how many years?
12 months. Whatever, like,
So
we
we
had
won't
those 3
incur-
items, we had those 3 items in capital. Pay for those out of fund balance in fiscal year 19. Do not incur any more short-term debt. So if I'm adding up these things right, it looks like about 500,000 for the remaining fiscal year 18 principal pay down, 2 million out of fund balance, 1.14 out of fund balance, well, I'm sorry, let me start over. taking down current short-term debt, 500,000 plus 2 million, plus the 1.2 in fiscal year 19.
Hmm.
So 3.1, close to 3.6, and then not incur additional short-term debt by paying for the 1,140,000 out of fund balance. That gets us through fiscal year 19.
So the key here is that I would need a motion for the $2 million to apply to the short-term debt on the 5th of June.
And is that a motion for what, a special appropriation out of the fund balance?
yeah.
Okay.
And that still leaves us with a decent percentage in the fund balance. And I had discussions with the financial advisor from Phoenix, and he doesn't think the $2 million will really affect the town's AAA rating at all. I mean, if we did this every year, $2 million a year, then yeah, it would affect the rating. They don't want to see that. But a one-shot deal, it's not.
So Bob, we had hoped that there would be more like $3 or $4 million to take out of the.
Yeah, his eyes kind of opened up when I brought that up. He didn't like that idea. It's way too much. So,
Though we'll effectively get there
yeah.
by taking the capital, paying for the capital.
They always bring up the fact that, you know, we're AAA, just like Greenwich and New Canaan, but there's, with the rating companies, there's a different feeling about us compared to them. They have the ability, without any question, to tax their residents and come up with the money if they had a shortfall. They're not as confident that we would have the same ability here in Bethel. And so if they saw any kind of a reduction in the fund balance, the reason why we got the AAA is because it was the high and solid fund balance that was maintained over a period of years. If we start to erode that number, they'll seriously think about reducing it to a AA+.
Are you saying Greenwich has that status because their charter's different or because their tax base is
Because they're
different?
Tax-based basis, the demographics is different.
You know, so I think what Bob is suggesting, right, is we need to take a slightly more thoughtful approach to how we want to use the fund balance to get us positioned for 2022. Right, we'll take this immediate 2 million, motion pending or motion to come, maybe use another 1.1 during the year, and then we'll come into fiscal year 20, we'll reassess, because the advice from Bob, the advisor, is based on 2017
Mhm.
fund balance. So to the extent fiscal year 18 adds to the fund balance, maybe we'll have more flexibility.
Yeah, you don't want to do too much because we do have pending bonds that are going to be out there. And we could save some interest here by paying down a short-term debt real, you know, on a big scale. But the cost could be tremendous for the interest if we went from a AAA to a AA+. You don't want to take that chance.
Right. We'll push it as hard as we can,
Yeah.
as far as we can. We'll have our discussions with our bond council, with our rating agencies, and our bond salespeople. But this seems to me to be a pretty good first step, kind of consistent with what we've been talking about. Right, so I guess I'd ask to entertain a motion of a special appropriation out of the fund balance for purposes of paying down short-term debt of $2 million.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was the first? Rob.
Any further discussion?
I just need to absorb it. I'm just thinking about it, trying to wrap numbers around in my head. And it just seems like, kind of, you know, what was put out there was that we were eliminating short-term debt, and kind of like, and again, my feelings were really all we're doing is switching it to long-term. So I guess my question is when we move that remaining money over to long-term debt, how much are we really saving with this 2 million? How much?
It's not only the 2 million, but it's the money that, the debt service that we're going to apply for next year, okay? The piece that we just was approved for the capital improvements, we're looking to maybe use the surplus from this year before it even hits the fund balance to pay for those assets. So,
But like, what's,
It's a real reduction in the 10,455. it's not shifting any of that to long term.
I mean, the other side of it is, Brian, I mean, interest rates are going up.
Absolutely.
You know, and, you know, this last one was, 115, 119. But we probably have to look at somewhere around 2% for June 5th. And the difference between the short and long term at this point, the long term, I think, went over 3% today. But it'll probably settle back down because it always does. And maybe within 2 weeks, we're gonna be in good shape. But, I mean, those numbers are really close. So whether it's in short or long at this point, and we
I
can
understand.
front load those assets that, or if it was a fire truck, if it was a plow truck, those items will be front loaded into the schedule, so we're paying them off sooner than later. Because you can't put a truck that we already have had for maybe 2 or 3 years and say it's gonna last another 20 years. It's gotta be paid off up front.
I guess my question is, what's the actual dollar savings if we looked at it?
Well, if you look at the $22 million, the interest on that is $300,000 right now.
And what happens, what's the interest gonna be when we turn it over to long term?
Well, that's what I'm saying, the rate is gonna be relatively close, it's gonna be close to the same number.
You just,
But the 2 million we won't turn to long term.
right. I guess, and again, I'm gonna choose my words very carefully, because sometimes I think people misinterpret what I'm saying. I guess my point is, this is kind of what I said from the beginning of the budget, what we're really doing is just shifting everything over to long-term debt. But it was sold like we had this master plan of eliminating short-term debt. Yeah, by just shifting it over to long-term debt. I mean, the
Yeah.
debt's not really going away.
But Brian,
I understand, Bob. I'm not-
you don't. Let me be clear. This is not shifting to long-term debt.
Mm-mm.
This is taking $2 million and paying off debt. It's $2 million less of debt.
I
So I
understand.
guess I'm picking on the words of
Right.
shifting to long-term debt. We're
Okay.
not. We're
But,
paying it off.
but the words that were put out was eliminating short-term debt, which we are by paying 2 million off and transferring how much over to long-term debt.
Well, right now, look at it, the $22 million, 12 million of that is the PD. So that's long-term anyway.
Yeah, got
So
it.
we're down to 10 million,
Yep.
all right? And we're paying down $2.5 million.
So 8.5 will shift to long-term.
Well, you got 10 million minus 2.5, 7.5.
10.5 minus 2, you said?
Well, all right, if you go to 10.5, if you go that way, all right, so $8 million at that point, and then we're gonna pay off another $1.2 million, all right?
Another
And then
half
in
million.
those, that short-term debt, there are long-term assets. And those are the items that we're gonna move over to the long-term debt. And that amounts to about $6 million, the long-term items in there.
And Brian, just to be clear, the comments that were made were about a longer-term plan for eliminating short-term debt. We didn't have $10 million to put to short-term debt anywhere. We never had that discussion. We did talk about 3 or 4 million, but that apparently is not something we can do, which we also talked about in a previous meeting because of our bond rating.
And again, the plan would be by the end of fiscal year 19 at a minimum is to pay off $3.5 million in short-term debt.
And
not-
going forward, not to incur any more short-term debt.
That's right.
Bob, what are some of those long-term assets?
What are they?
It's what-
The trucks. I mean, we purchased trucks over the last few years, a couple of fire
Well,
trucks
that's
that were in
a
there.
different story. Excuse me.
I mean, you got the roads too, that's a big
I'm
item.
sorry, let's just,
Yeah.
one
Sorry.
conversation, please.
I just missed what you said because there's something going on. So the trucks,
You've got the big plow trucks that, you know, they go for 300,000, no, maybe $200,000 a piece. But you got a couple of fire trucks in there, those are 6.
right, so I mean, how much do you reckon is gonna be put over to long-term debt that are long-term assets?
What, include the roads too?
Include whatever, I mean.
Yeah,
what
so
kind-
I mean, it's gonna be about $6 million,
Okay,
maybe a
most.
little less.
Right. Because the idea of using some of the surplus from fiscal year 2018.
When you start to use that too.
And again, I'm not trying to be argumentative, like Dave, I was just trying to say, Dan asked me a question. And I said, you know, kind of what I thought from the beginning, if we're saying we're not gonna bond, incur more short-term debt, you know, where's that money gonna come from in a year when we only have an 800,000 growth in the grand list? You still have contractual raises. you still have, you know, other maintenance items that are gonna go up. And I've never seen a year where we've bonded under $1 million, because next year we have fire truck requests, we have renovation requests, we have numerous requests. And this has been my point all along is, how is this plan realistic? How are we gonna get there? It's already been presented that this is what we're gonna do. And I just wanna know how we're gonna do it without, we talked about the mill rate, increasing the mill rate exponentially. And this was my whole point all along. It's a great plan to pay off short-term debt. I love it.
Well, if you'll.
But it's gotta be phased in slowly, so we don't have a year where we have a 1.3 million increase just in bonding, and we still have another $1 million in salary increases, and we're at a 2.3 million increase on an $800,000 growth in the grant list. That's my only point, and that's what I've been trying to say the whole time.
Right. And what I've been trying to say, Brian, is we have a plan to minimize that. You may recall this spreadsheet that was handed out by the bond advisor. And the idea is to eliminate band P&I.
Mhm.
You eliminate that band P&I, it offsets the debt P&I that's coming off of the school. That's how we're gonna minimize the mill rate impact. To your point, we have to stay disciplined between now and 2022. You gotta start with the first step. And this is the first step in the direction of getting to where we need to be in 2022. And it would be helpful, but I know for the newer board members, I don't know if we've had this handed out. Brian and Cynthia have seen it before. It would be helpful to have.
I'm gonna get an updated one from Barry. I asked him in the email the other day, for one. I know he had a closing today, not a closing, but he had a sale with Barry.
By reducing the short-term debt, we basically, according to this schedule, offset nearly all of the increase from the school at the police station line. So,
But as long as we don't incur any more debt, and that's my point.
Mr. Chair, I think that it would behoove us to, when we're not in a budget crunch, to put on the agenda some discussion on ways to restrain.
Oh, we're looking at this. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that what we're talking about?
No.
Okay.
You just pointed it out to me, that's all.
So I died to recycle.
Are the voices in my head getting too loud? So, that we discuss ways to restrain spending, ways to cut spending, we have to phase that into the conversation, otherwise all is for naught.
what do we think about the next board meeting? I'm not sure we have much business yet. Use the next board meeting for a discussion of kind of ideas for how to proceed during fiscal year 19.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, by me.
Cool. Any more discussion on?
Need a motion?
No.
No, we have-
We have a
we have
motion
a
that's
motion.
on. Any more discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, do I need to restate the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain. I'm still wrapping my head around everything, so it's gonna pass, and we'll see how we move forward.
All right, that's it for agenda items. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion.
Second?
All those in favor?
I will say aye.
Done. Thank you.
Thank you.